Checking the animal head for legal validation. The animal cylinder head tech is one of the most in-depth checks because of the impact it has on engine performance. By simply tweaking components or the head itself, a dramatic effect on performance can be gained. For this reason, there are numerous parameters that must be inspected to prove that alterations have not been done. To carry out a full inspection of the head, it first must be removed from the engine. Once accessories like the exhaust and other brackets are removed from the engine, the cylinder head air shield can be removed. Use a 7mm socket to remove the one retaining screw on the left side of the engine and work the shield from the engine. To access the components of the head, remove the valve cover using a 10mm metric socket. With the cover removed, the rocker arms, rocker balls, push rods, valve retainers, valve springs, valves, head plate, gaskets are all accessible. The easiest way to check the legality of the parts is to check them as you remove them. The rocker ball is the first component to remove from the head assembly. Use a 5/8 inch wrench and remove it by turning counterclockwise. Once you remove the balls, check them for conformity by inserting them into the no-go gauge. Go no-go means that it either should pass through or not pass through the tool. As with any component, check it for signs of modifications like grinding marks. The rocker arms are checked by visual inspection and then physically verifying the length. Use tool A13 to verify the minimum length of the rocker arm. Push rods can be removed by simply pulling them out of their guides. Measure the diameter of the push rods with a known good caliber or micrometer. Check the overall length of the push rod using gauge A5. Check the rocker stud for signs of modification and that it is parallel to the head plate surface. The carb must now be removed from the engine so that the intake manifold and port can be inspected. Remove the carburetor by using two open-ended 10mm wrenches and unbolting it from the manifold. The intake manifold is removed by unbolting two 5mm Allen head bolts, retaining it to the head. Once the intake is removed, a group of inspections can be performed on it. The first inspection is to visibly look over the intake for any modifications. The mounting holes can be opened up, but they cannot be bigger than .328 inches. The same tool is used to check the slot width. Check to see that the ends of the intake are flat and don't induce any air leaks. They can be machined to make the overall length fall within the spec. The length call out is 1.740 inch no-go and 1.760 inch must-go using tool number A12. The inside diameter of the intake must be checked against the gauge. Tool number A11 is used as a go-no-go check. Paint and minor ID flaws do not make the part illegal. To continue on with the inspections, the head must be removed from the engine. Using a 10mm socket wrench, unscrew the four head bolts located in the outer corners of the head. Upon removing the head, check the gasket for conformity by measuring it to check its thickness. This spec is reduced to .042 inches for the fire ring head gasket when measured around the steel ring. Check the gasket in numerous places to get a good reading. To move forward with your inspection, the valves must be removed from the head. Do this by pushing down on the retainers and removing the keepers from the valves. Safety glasses should be worn when doing any tech procedure. Lay the parts out in an organized fashion so that they can easily be inspected. Continue with your inspection by visibly inspecting the valves. Look for any forms of polishing or grinding on the valve stems and faces. Using your calipers, check the overall length of the intake and exhaust valve. The minimum spec is 3.362 inches. The face angle of both valves is one 45-degree angle. This is checked visually using tool A22. Check the depth of the valve head dish using a depth micrometer. To check the margin depth, use gauge A26 for the intake and A27 for the exhaust. Use a depth micrometer to measure from the top face of the valve to the face of the gauge. The final check for the valves is to verify the head diameter. This is done with a go-no-go gauge for both the intake and exhaust. Confirm that the valves don't pass through the gauge. The valve springs are the next measurement parameter for verifying legality. They are a crucial part of the engine performance and should be looked at accordingly. Use a caliper to measure the wire diameter of the spring. The wire must fall between 0.103 inches to 0.107 inches in diameter and should be verified in 3 places. Again, using your calipers, check the inside diameter of the spring and make sure it falls between 0.615 to 0.630 inches. The length of the spring is checked using gauge number A15 and calls out a maximum length of 0.931 inches. The retainer thickness should be verified with a caliper. Minimum thickness is 0.055 inches and maximum is 0.075 inches. The inlet port of the head is one of the most crucial tech areas because it can have a great effect on performance. The number one thing to look for is that no modifications have been done to the port, which may include grinding, shaping, rounding of edges, or resizing. Use a light and a mirror if needed to do an adequate inspection of the port. Use gauge A28 to verify by inserting the .860 inch end into the port, looking to see if the port has been modified at the transition point to the seat area. Next, verify the bigger end of the gauge, A28, doesn't slide all the way to the valve guide. The inlet diameter of the port cannot exceed 0.918 inches as verified by no-go tool A6. The valve seats should have only one 45-degree seating angle, and the inside diameter must be checked with go-no-go gauge A2 for the intake and tool A1 for the exhaust seat. The depth of the head is checked using 2 tools in different specs. The lower part of the head across the dowel pins has to be a minimum of 0.011 inches. This same check is also to be taken on the shelf above the spark plug. The deepest part of the chamber, measured from the gasket surface to the center of the valves, must be at least 0.319 inches deep. Depth of the valve seats from the gasket surface must fall between 0.330 to 0.360 inches. Finally, tool A29 is used to check the overall depth of the head from the head plate surface to the gasket surface. This is checked in 4 locations, through the valve guide holes and through the pushrod holes. The tool must not protrude past the head gasket surface. The width of the combustion chamber must be checked using tool A30 at the widest point. The tool must not pass into the head all the way. The depth of the valve guide is checked off to the head gasket surface with a depth micrometer and must not exceed 1.255 inches. The exhaust port has a maximum diameter of .980 inches and is checked with no-go tool A6. The port is legal if there is at least one entry point to the port where the no-go gauge does not enter the port. The port has to be as supplied from the factory, no grinding or alterations allowed. This concludes an in-depth look at the animal racing head tech procedure. Tech tools are designed to raise a red flag as to any potential issue. Once raised, make sure to use every method possible to prove a racer is legal. A set of dial calibers, a comparison to a like part, or a backup set of tech tools should be used. Remember, the role as a tech official is to try to prove a racer is legal, not illegal.